Hey, Sam here from Sugar Spun Run, and today we are making a classic chicken pot pie. I have previously shared a biscuit top pot pie, you know, the kind you bake right in the pot, throw some biscuits on top and bake it. That one's delicious, but I wanted to share my classic version with you today. Now for this recipe, we're going to be baking it in a 9.5-inch pie plate. I will try to remember to link to these. They're very inexpensive. I use them for everything. And you will need 2 pre-made pie doughs, or pie crusts. You could use store-bought for this recipe, that would be fine. Obviously, I recommend using a homemade pie crust. I will link to mine in the description. My classic one with the sour cream works great, but today I am using my sourdough pie crusts because they're just my favorite right now. So I have 2 of these made. They're just getting a little warm, so I'm going to go pop these in my fridge real quickly. All right, so we'll assume your pie doughs are already prepped. You'll want to get your oven preheating to 425 degrees Fahrenheit, and we are going to head over to the stovetop where you will need a large skillet, large pan. We're going to add a 1/3 cup of butter to the pan. This is salted butter I'm using today. We're going to turn our heat to medium. Let's melt this butter. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about this later on, but if you have some pre-cooked, leftover, chopped up, or shredded chicken, or you just want to use a rotisserie chicken for this recipe, totally fine. You can, and I will put some notes in the description of the recipe explaining how to do this. But today, I'm assuming that you just have raw chicken, and that's what we're going to be cooking today. All right, once my butter's nice and melted, I'm going to add some of my veggies, starting with about a cup or a heaping cup of chopped yellow onion. This is like 1 medium yellow onion. Drop all that in there. And I also have like a cup of chopped carrots, 140 grams each. And this is usually 2 carrots for me. Now I'm going to get these mixed into the butter and we'll cook them until they're softened, which usually takes like 5 minutes, maybe 6. If you want your carrots to look a little bit prettier, you can peel them. They'll be a nice brighter orange, but me, I'm just trying to get dinner on the table most of the time. Peels are just fine for you. All right, once your veggies are nice and tender, we're going to sprinkle some flour over top. This is a 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. And here I also like to add my spices. We'll add 3/4 teaspoon of table salt, a 1/2 teaspoon of smoked paprika, which is like my secret weapon. It makes this taste amazing. 1/4 teaspoon of ground dry mustard and a 1/4 teaspoon of ground black pepper. We're going to stir everything together until that flour is all nicely absorbed. Now I'm going to be using fresh thyme for today's recipe, but if you don't have fresh thyme and you're using dried, you would add that here as well. You would be adding a 1/4 teaspoon of dried thyme. All right, now we're going to add our chicken broth and we're going to slowly drizzle this in. And while I'm doing this, I'm scraping the bottom of the pan. That way, if any browning has occurred, we're scraping that into the dish because it has a ton of flavor. So we don't want to leave it there. Plus, it'll make cleaning your pan easier when you're done. All right, so I'm gradually adding this and stirring. This is going to allow it to thicken as well. Now, I don't know about you, but I cannot stand a dry pot pie. I like one that has a little bit of moisture to it. My grandmother used to make hers with a gravy and dumplings on the side, and I would just pour that over the pot pie, which was more dry. But when I'm making it myself, I like everything to be nice and kind of juicy. So this is 2.5 cups of chicken broth, and we're going to immediately drizzle in a 1/3 cup of heavy cream, or you could use milk if you wanted to instead. It's a nice little creaminess to the dish. Nut milk would also work fine here, just not quite as creamy and velvety if you use one of those. All right, next let's talk chicken. If you recall correctly, I like to use just raw chicken. Not that I like to use it, but that's what I'm using today. If you were using pre-cooked chicken, you would not be adding it here. I have a pound of chicken breast. If you were using thighs, you could drop them in the dish just as they are. But I'm using breasts and I want them to cook quickly. I want them to cook on par with my potatoes I'm going to be adding. So I'm going to add these right into the pan. And I'm going to cut them into pieces that are not too thick. So right here, usually I cut them in half, but this piece of chicken is a little bit thicker, so I'm going to cut it into 3 pieces. We'll add it into the pan. I want to get that nicely nestled in there, but we'll come back to that in just a moment. We're also going to add 1.5 cups of diced potatoes. You don't want them to be diced too large. You want them to be nice and bite-sized. You could use russet potatoes if you want. Just peel them first. I am using gold or yellow potatoes, and I don't peel them because the skin is so thin, it doesn't really matter. All right, the important thing here is that you want to make sure that the potatoes and chicken are completely submerged. So if you need to cut your chicken a little bit smaller, go ahead and do that. And we're going to bring this to a boil. You'll want to stir it occasionally. We are going to cook this until the potatoes are fork tender and the chicken is cooked enough that it's easily shreddable. I have found when I cut my chicken like this and my potatoes like this usually happens right about the same time. Oh, and if you are using fresh thyme like I am, we're going to add that here as well. So it's going to take a little bit for the chicken and the potatoes to cook properly or cook enough. So I'm just going to set this aside, and now is a good time to start working with our pie doughs. So just pull these out of the fridge. I'm going to lightly flour my surface and work with one dough at a time, And if you're wondering, hey, why does her pie crust look really spotty and kind of like it has leprosy? That's just because I used coconut sugar. It's going to bake up just fine. I'm just going to roll this out to about a 12-inch circle. And I think I mentioned before that today I am using my sourdough pie crust, which I don't have a video for yet. Let me know if that's something you'd like to see, but I do have the recipe shared in full on the website. It also makes enough dough that the fact that I cannot roll a nice clean circle to save my life doesn't even matter. We'll just trim off any excess. So the way I write my recipes is the way I always test them. So for example, the first many rounds of this recipe were made using heavy cream, but I've also tested it with nut milk. This pie crust was originally made with granulated sugar, but I've also tested it with coconut sugar. So we do have some food sensitivities and ingredient sensitivities in the house. So I do like to try substitutions just for anyone else who might be dealing with that. That way I can say, yes, I've tried it and I know it works, or please don't do that, it doesn't work. And don't forget about your chicken over here. Do keep scraping the bowl or the dish, because otherwise things are going to burn to the bottom because it is such a thick sauce, and you'll have a bad time cleaning it. The way to check that your pie dough is large enough, just make sure you can fit the pie plate over it. Let's move this over to our pie plate. I think I already mentioned this, but I'm using a 9.5-inch pie plate. This is not a super deep pie plate, it's pretty standard, but you don't want to use a shallow pie plate or everything won't fit. Oh, that was a terrible job. Let me arrange that better. This is ready to go, and I'm just going to roll out this dough as well so that it's ready for me when I need it. Roll this up. And I don't want this to get too warm. I'm not sure exactly how much longer that will take, but under these lights, my doughs are getting a little warm anyway, so I'm going to put both of these in my refrigerator. All right, let's check on our chicken and our potatoes. If you recall, we want the potatoes to be nice and easy to pierce with a fork. Actually, that needs a little bit more time. And we want our chicken to be nice and shreddable. So if your chicken is ready before your potatoes, like mine is, we are going to remove it to a plate. You can remove the thyme at this point too, if you'd like. Honestly, sometimes I just bake it right in the pot pie for even more flavor. But if you're worried about leaving it in, you can take it out now. And this chicken should shred easily with a fork. If it's not shredding easily, it just needs more time to cook. Now, if you had pre-cooked chicken, you would add it after the potatoes are done cooking, when they're nice and fork tender, and you would add it with the veggies, which you may see waiting in the wings there. And I much prefer shredded chicken in my pot pie to diced chicken. I don't know why, to me it just should always be shredded, but if you want yours cut, you could cut it instead. And once I've shredded all of this, it will just rest on the plate until the potatoes are done. Oh, and if you're using pre-cooked chicken, you would need about 3 cups. 3 heaping cups is fine. All right, once your chicken is shredded or cut into bite-sized pieces, again, we'll let it rest on the plate until the potatoes are done. These actually feel great. Talk about good timing. I'm going to return this chicken right to the pan or skillet, and I'm going to add my mixed veggies. I have 2 cups of frozen mixed veggies. You can use whatever blend you like. Personally, I really like lima beans in my pot pie. I don't have any today, but I don't know if that makes me weird. My mom gets really funny about lima beans. She doesn't like them. All right, so let's get everything mixed together and well distributed. Remove some of that thyme so no one gets mad at me. All right, turn off the heat. Let me grab my crusts. Now, when I am baking my pot pie, I do so on a parchment or foil lined baking sheet. Do this with a lot of recipes just because if there's any spilling, it can be a real pain to clean that up later on. So this is just gonna save you from any spills, or it's a guarantee against spills. Slide this a little bit over and make sure you guys can see everything, including how poorly I lined this up. We'll just call it rustic. I'm going to try to gracefully transfer this into the pan, or the pot, the pie plate. You can come with me, thyme. Leave that thyme sprig behind. Have my other pie crust. Try to line this one up a little bit better. And you'll want to fold over the excess pie crust. You could trim it off and dispose of it, but that would be really sad because it's delicious. So I just like to kind of make a nice thick layer of crust. So I'm just kind of folding the top and bottom together or pressing them together. And then you can go around with a fork, but I'm just going to go around. I'll show you. All right, I can't do two things at once. All right, go around. Now I'm going to do a quick egg wash, which is just going to give this crust a nice golden color. It's just one egg, splash of water, like a teaspoon of water, or you could use milk. We'll whisk this together, with that yolk nicely broken up. So the egg wash looks smooth and pretty and not streaky. And then we'll brush this lightly over the pie. Work quickly because this is a heat sensitive pie dough on a very hot filling. Be quick and gentle. Don't want to tear any holes. I feel like I did all right there. Then we're going to vent this. Just an X in the center. Works nicely. Do a couple extra. I do not think I centered that. Oh well, it's still gonna taste the same. All right, this is now going to go on this baking sheet to the center rack of our 425 Fahrenheit preheated oven. We are going to bake it until the filling will be bubbly inside and the crust will be nice and golden brown. This usually takes about 25 to 35 minutes. So once the pot pie is finished baking, you're going to want to let it cool for like 10 or 15 minutes before you cut into it. This is going to keep you from, burning your tongue when you eat it, but it's also going to help it stay a little bit more in pie form. Now, as I mentioned, my pot pie is a nice juicy one, so it's a little more prone to falling apart, especially if it's a little bit hot, but to me, the taste is worth it. So we're gonna go ahead and slice into this guy. It's been about 15 minutes now, and you can see exactly what I mean. It's gonna be a little messy, don't panic. Now switch to a spoon and get any filling that you left behind. Oh yeah. I'm so excited about this. Pot pie is one of my favorite foods. And I want you to admire this for a minute, that juiciness to it. Like it's still a pie, right? But it has such a nice sauce to it. One of the easiest ways to go wrong with pot pie is to make it too dry. This is not too dry. That is how you make my classic chicken pot pie from scratch. I really hope you enjoy this recipe and the technique I use. I hope this becomes a staple in your home. If you try it, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. I really do always love hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Oh, I really do love this recipe. With paprika, anyone who doesn't use paprika in pot pie is missing out. Sometimes I amaze myself. And today, let me settle down over here. Sorry, I can't talk and chew gum. Or is it walk and chew gum? And you don't burn your... One moment, please.